What happens when a comedy icon steps into what should have been a light-hearted morning show chat, only to find himself ambushed by a host with a clear agenda? The atmosphere crackled with tension the moment Eddie Murphy walked onto The View's set. No one could have anticipated the fiery clash that was about to erupt between him and Joy Behar. This wasn't just a celebrity interview gone awry. It was a masterclass in how fast things can spiral when respect takes a back seat. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping story, hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments. You're going to want to talk about this one. Eddie Murphy was on a press tour promoting his latest project, and The View was meant to be a routine stop. He strode onto the set with his signature grin, greeting the hosts with the warmth and professionalism of a 40-year entertainment veteran. Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and the rest of the panel welcomed him with genuine excitement, thrilled to have such a legend in their midst. "Eddie, it's so great to have you here," Whoopi said warmly as he settled into the guest chair. "We've been counting down to this all week." "Thanks for having me. It's always a good time," Eddie replied, his voice brimming with the effortless charm that's won over millions. The interview kicked off smoothly, with Eddie diving into his new project with infectious enthusiasm. He shared hilarious behind-the-scenes stories, his comedic timing as sharp as ever, leaving the hosts and audience in stitches. His charisma lit up the room as he talked about collaborating with his cast and crew, revealing a deep love for the craft. "Even after all these years, I get a rush from new projects," he said, his eyes sparkling. "There's something special about bringing characters to life and giving people a laugh, a thought, or a feeling they didn't see coming." Sarah Haynes nodded eagerly. "That passion really shines through. You've stayed relevant across generations. How do you do it?" "Comedy's universal," Eddie answered. "People need to laugh, especially now. If I can give them a moment of escape or joy, I'm doing my job." But then, Joy Behar, who'd been unusually silent, leaned forward with a glint in her eye that signaled trouble. "Speaking of comedy," she cut in, her tone sharp and deliberate, slicing through the warm vibe like a knife. "Don't you think some of your older material might be seen as problematic today?" The shift was instant. Eddie's smile wavered as the room's energy turned tense. The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances, sensing Joy was steering into choppy waters. "I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?" Eddie asked, keeping his cool but clearly thrown by the sudden pivot. Joy doubled down, her voice laced with challenge. "Some of your early stand-up jokes, don't you think they'd offend people now? Shouldn't you apologize for that content?" Whoopi tried to intervene, her tone gentle but firm. "Joy, maybe we should stick to Eddie's current work." But Joy wasn't having it. If anything, Whoopi's attempt to redirect only fueled her. "No, this is important," she insisted. "In today's world, don't public figures need to own up to past mistakes?" Eddie sat up straighter, his expression tightening as he realized this wasn't the friendly chat he'd expected. "Mistakes? Let's get one thing straight, Joy," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I've been doing comedy for over 40 years. Comedians push boundaries. That's the job." "At whose expense?" Joy fired back, her voice rising. "Some of those boundaries hurt people. Comedy's about holding a mirror to society. Flaws, contradictions, and all," Eddie countered, his tone steady but with a growing edge. "If we start judging art through today's lens, retroactively policing it, where does that leave us?" Joy leaned back with a smug smile as if she'd cornered him. "So you're saying you have no regrets about any of your past work?" "I'm saying I stand by my work," Eddie replied, his voice resolute. "I'm proud of what I've created. I've grown as a person and as a performer over the years, just like anyone else," Eddie Murphy said, his voice steady but laced with conviction. "But I'm not going to sit here and grovel for making people laugh or for being part of comedy's history." The View studio felt like a pressure cooker. Audience members squirmed in their seats, sensing the escalating tension. The other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and the rest, looked visibly uneasy, grappling with how to navigate the hostile atmosphere Joy Behar had ignited. "That's a convenient way to dodge accountability," Joy snapped, her tone dripping with barely veiled disdain. Eddie's jaw tightened, his patience wearing thin. "Convenient? You think it's convenient to be ambushed on what was supposed to be a friendly interview to promote my work? You think it's convenient to have my 40-year career reduced to whatever talking points you cooked up before I walked in here?" Joy leaned back, her expression defensive but with a hint of satisfaction, as if she relished the chaos she'd stirred. "I'm just asking the questions that need to be asked," she said, though her tone betrayed a confrontational edge far removed from genuine curiosity. "You're not asking questions," Eddie shot back, his voice rising for the first time, sharp and unyielding. "You're throwing accusations and demanding apologies for comedy from a different time. Do you hold every comedian who's ever pushed the envelope to this standard, or am I just the lucky one sitting here today?" The other hosts shifted uncomfortably. Sarah Haynes tried to interject with a conciliatory comment, but Eddie wasn't done. "Let me ask you something, Joy," he said, turning to face her directly, his gaze piercing. "Have you ever said anything in your career that someone might find offensive? Ever told a joke that might not hold up today? Because if we're playing this game of judging the past, shouldn't it apply to everyone?" Joy's face flushed, her earlier smugness replaced by defensive anger. She hadn't expected Eddie to flip the script so deftly. "That's completely different," she stammered, clearly rattled. "I've never done the kind of material you have." "Really?" Eddie raised an eyebrow, his skeptical expression cutting through her deflection. "So you've never made a joke about someone's looks, their background, their beliefs? Never said anything that might have stung someone?" Whoopi jumped in, her voice calm but urgent, trying to douse the flames. "Maybe we should take a breath here and remember we're all on the same side." But Eddie wasn't backing down. Joy's attempt to hold him to a standard she clearly didn't apply to herself had struck a nerve. "No, Whoopi, this is exactly the conversation we need to have," he said firmly. "What's happening right now is a textbook example of the double standards killing honest discussion in this country." "Double standards?" Joy scoffed, her indignation palpable. "You're being a bit dramatic, Eddie." "Dramatic?" Eddie let out a humorless laugh. "Joy, you ambushed me on live TV, demanding I apologize for my entire career, and I'm the dramatic one for calling out the hypocrisy?" The audience sat in stunned silence, captivated by the raw, unfiltered clash unfolding before them. This wasn't the usual polished banter of daytime TV. It was a collision of two formidable personalities with clashing perspectives. "I wasn't ambushing you," Joy protested, though her defensive tone suggested she knew exactly what she'd been doing. "I was asking legitimate questions about accountability in entertainment." "Legitimate questions?" Eddie's voice rose again, his legendary composure fraying under Joy's relentless prodding. "You came in here with a clear agenda to paint me as the bad guy, and now you're trying to spin this like it's some noble quest for truth." Sarah Haynes made another desperate attempt to steer the conversation back to civility, but the damage was done. The confrontation had laid bare a deeper divide, one that wasn't about to be smoothed over with pleasantries. "I think what we're getting at here is how artists can evolve while still respecting their past work," Sarah Haynes offered, her voice a hopeful attempt to steer the conversation to calmer waters. "Thank you, Sarah," Eddie Murphy said, his tone softening briefly toward the one host who seemed genuinely interested in a constructive dialogue. "That's what growth is about. Learning from your experiences and creating from a place of truth. Not erasing your past or pretending it didn't exist." But Joy Behar wasn't ready to let go of her crusade. "Authenticity doesn't excuse harm, Eddie," she shot back, her voice sharp with accusation. "Words have consequences, and public figures need to own up when they've caused pain." Eddie's eyes narrowed, a mix of frustration and disbelief flashing across his face. There it is, the assumption that comedy's purpose is to harm. Do you even get what comedy is, Joy? Do you understand its role in society? I understand that comedy can marginalize people and perpetuate harmful stereotypes, Joy retorted, leaning forward as if she'd found her footing with her social justice rhetoric. Comedy can also challenge power, speak truth, and help people process tough realities through laughter, Eddie countered, his voice steady but edged with exasperation. But I guess that doesn't fit the narrative you're pushing, does it? The other hosts looked increasingly desperate to defuse the spiraling hostility. Whoopi Goldberg, who'd stayed mostly quiet as the clash intensified, finally stepped in with authority. "Hold on, both of you," she said, her voice firm, drawing on years of moderating experience. "We're adults here. We can disagree without tearing each other apart." "Whoopi's right," Sarah chimed in quickly. "There's room for different views on this," but Joy, undeterred, couldn't resist one last jab. "I just think someone with a platform as big as yours has a responsibility to use it carefully." That was the breaking point for Eddie. His patience, stretched thin by Joy's sanctimonious tone, finally snapped. "Responsibility to who, Joy? To you? To whatever group decides what's acceptable this week? Or to the millions of fans who've supported my work for 40 years? To society," Joy replied, her voice thick with self-righteousness, oblivious to how condescending she sounded. "Society?" Eddie's tone was now laced with incredulous anger. "You think you speak for society? You think your personal take on what's appropriate represents hundreds of millions of people? I speak for those who value basic human decency," Joy said, doubling down, her voice rising to match his. "Basic human decency?" Eddie repeated, his voice growing louder, each word dripping with frustration. "Is it decent to ambush a guest on your show? Is it decent to attack someone's life's work without context or nuance? Is it decent to demand apologies for art created decades ago in a completely different world?" Joy's face flushed bright red, her voice trembling with anger, as her attempt to corner Eddie backfired spectacularly. "I don't have to sit here and be lectured by someone who built their career on offensive material. And I don't have to sit here and be attacked by someone who invited me under false pretenses." Eddie fired back, his words sharp and unyielding. "Did you think I'd just sit quietly while you tried to dismantle everything I've built? That I'd smile and nod while you reduced my career to your personal vendetta?" The studio was electric with tension. The other hosts looked panicked, scrambling to salvage what had become a full-blown disaster. The audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing a raw, unscripted clash that shattered the polished veneer of daytime TV. This was no ordinary interview. It was a battle of principles, laid bare for all to see. "That's exactly the kind of aggressive behavior I was talking about," Joy Behar said, scrambling to reclaim the moral high ground, her voice tinged with desperation. "Aggressive behavior?" Eddie Murphy's laugh was sharp and bitter, cutting through the studio's thick tension. "Joy, you've spent the last 10 minutes attacking my work, my character, and everything I stand for, and I'm the aggressive one for standing up for myself? Unbelievable!" Whoopi Goldberg made a final attempt to quell the chaos. "Okay, everyone, let's take a deep breath," she said, her authoritative tone trying to anchor the spiraling interview. "We're discussing important issues here, and we can do it without this turning into a war." But Eddie was done with diplomacy. Joy's relentless attacks, cloaked as social commentary, had pushed him past his limit. The gloves were off, and Joy was about to learn she'd underestimated her opponent. With deliberate precision, Eddie rose from his chair, his movements calm, but his eyes burning with an intensity that silenced the room. The atmosphere shifted from tense to electric, as if the air itself held its breath. "You know what, Joy?" Eddie's voice dropped to a low, steely calm that carried more weight than any shout. "I've been in this game for over 40 years. I've faced critics, haters, and people who wanted to tear me down. But I've never met someone with the gall to invite me onto their show just to ambush me with this sanctimonious nonsense. Joy shifted in her seat, her earlier bravado faltering as she sensed she'd gone too far. "Eddie, you're overreacting to simple questions," she said, her voice weaker now, unconvincing. "Simple questions?" Eddie's voice erupted, the fury in it making the audience flinch. "You call attacking my life's work simple questions? You call demanding I apologize for making millions laugh simple questions? Lady, you wouldn't know a simple question if it came with a PowerPoint presentation." The producers, frantic behind the cameras, signaled desperately to cut to commercial, but the confrontation was too raw, too fast for anyone to stop. "I was trying to have a meaningful conversation about accountability," Joy said, her confidence crumbling under Eddie's unrelenting response. "Meaningful conversation?" Eddie's laugh was harsh, devoid of his usual warmth. "Joy, you wouldn't know a meaningful conversation if it came with a manual and a translator. You weren't looking for dialogue. You were trying to score cheap points by attacking someone you thought would just take it." Whoopi stood now, her voice urgent as she tried to regain control. "Eddie, maybe we should all just cool off for a second." "No, Whoopi," Eddie said, turning to her with a fire still blazing in his eyes. "I'm done cooling off. I'm tired of pretending this kind of behavior is okay. I'm tired of people like Joy turning every conversation into a chance to lecture, shame, and play the morality police instead of actually engaging." He spun back to Joy, who now looked visibly shaken by the force of his response. "You want to talk about harm, Joy? Let's talk about the harm you've caused with this stunt. You took what could have been a celebration of creativity and turned it into a toxic attack. You've shown millions of viewers that real dialogue is impossible when someone comes in with an agenda to tear the other person down." "I wasn't trying to tear you down," Joy protested, her voice hollow, lacking any real conviction. "Really?" Eddie's sarcasm cut like a blade. "So what do you call spending 15 minutes attacking my character, my work, my integrity? What do you call demanding apologies for comedy that brought joy to millions? If that's not trying to tear me down, then I'd love to hear what your idea of a friendly chat looks like." Sarah Haynes made one last desperate attempt to salvage the wreckage. "I think there's some miscommunication here." "No miscommunication, Sarah," Eddie interrupted, his tone softening slightly toward her, but turning razor-sharp as he glanced back at Joy. "This is crystal clear. This was a calculated attack," Eddie Murphy said, his voice low but seething with conviction. "Joy, you knew exactly what you were doing when you crafted those questions. You wanted a reaction, a spectacle. Your only mistake was thinking I'd just sit here and let you steamroll me." Joy Behar, scrambling to regain her footing, made one last attempt to wrest control of the situation. "You're being paranoid, Eddie," she said, her tone dripping with forced dismissal. "Not everything's a conspiracy against you." It was the worst possible thing she could have said. Eddie's eyes widened, his fury erupting with a force that seemed to catch even him by surprise. "Paranoid?" he roared, his voice echoing through the studio. "Joy, you've spent the last 20 minutes systematically dismantling everything I've built in my career, and you're calling me paranoid for noticing? You think you can gaslight me into doubting my own reality?" The audience sat frozen, gripped by the raw emotion pouring from a comedy legend defending his legacy. This wasn't just a celebrity losing his cool. It was a master of his craft, standing up to someone who'd clearly underestimated his resolve and intellect. "This is the problem with people like you. Joy," Eddie continued, his voice carrying the weight of 4 decades in an industry that had tested him time and again. "You think you can attack anyone, say anything, and when they push back with justified anger, you dismiss them as overreacting or paranoid. Well, I've got news for you. That trick doesn't work on me." Joy sat in stunned silence, her earlier confidence shattered by the verbal onslaught. Her attempt at gotcha journalism had unraveled completely. "You know what's truly tragic here, Joy?" Eddie said, his voice softening slightly, but still razor-sharp with intensity. "You had a chance to have a real conversation with someone who's spent 40 years mastering comedy, connecting with audiences, and evolving as an artist. You could have asked about the creative process, the art of humor, or the responsibility of making people laugh. Instead, you turned this into a cheap political ambush because that's the only way you know how to operate." He paused, locking eyes with the camera, his presence commanding. "And that," he said, delivering his final devastating blow, "is more offensive than any joke I've ever told." The studio fell into a heavy silence, Eddie's words lingering like a thunderclap. After several long seconds, Whoopi Goldberg cleared her throat, her voice unsteady as she tried to restore order. "Well, this has been an intense discussion," she said, the understatement betraying how rattled she was by the showdown. Eddie surveyed the studio one last time, his anger cooling but his disappointment palpable. "It didn't have to be, Whoopi," he said quietly. "It really didn't." With that, he walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned audience, a group of shaken hosts, and a thoroughly humbled Joy Behar, who had just learned the hard way that some people won't bow to ambush tactics. If you were riveted by this epic takedown of a legend standing his ground, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What do you think Joy was really trying to achieve with her attack on Eddie Murphy?